No one in that frozen clearing knew the truth. Not the veteran gripping his coat against the cold, not the dog limping faithfully at his side, and certainly not the sobbing bride in the wheelchair. In less than 24 hours, a single act of kindness would collide with a secret worth billions, and none of their lives would ever be the same. The snow fell thick and quiet, the kind that muffles the world and makes every sound feel like a secret. Elias Carter had learned long ago that silence could be louder than gunfire. It followed him home from the war, settled into his bones, and never quite let go. At 46, his beard was more gray than brown, his back permanently stiff, and his eyes always searching, like danger might still be hiding behind the trees. Beside him walked Ghost, a wolf-colored dog with one torn ear and a limp that matched Elias's own. They had met years ago in a place neither liked to remember. Since then, they were inseparable, two survivors stitched together by loss. That morning, Elias was hauling firewood from the forest to his rusted blue pickup when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong, crying. Not the wind, not the wind, not an animal. A human sob, raw and broken. Ghost stopped first. His ears lifted. Elias followed the sound through the trees until he saw her. She sat alone in the snow, wrapped in a thin white wedding dress that was already soaking through. Her arms were crossed tightly around herself, her shoulders shaking as tears froze on her lashes. The wheelchair beneath her was slightly tilted, one wheel stuck in a drift. There was no road nearby, no footprints except her own, and the ones that had clearly walked away. Elias felt something twist in his chest. "Mom?" he called gently, careful not to startle her. She looked up, eyes wide with fear at first, then exhaustion. Please," she whispered, her voice barely stronger than the wind. "I don't know where I am." Her name was Claire. She didn't offer more than that. She said her car had left. She said the ceremony was over before it began. She didn't explain why she was here in the forest on the coldest day of the year, dressed like a dream that had shattered mid-sentence. Elias didn't ask questions. He never did when pain was that fresh. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders, ignoring the bite of the cold against his own skin. Ghost pressed against her leg, warm and steady, and for the first time since Elias arrived, she let out a sound that wasn't a sob. Wasn't a sob, it was a breath. Getting her to the truck took time. The wheelchair was heavy, the snow unforgiving. Elias slipped twice, scraping his hands raw, but he kept going. When Claire apologized, he shook his head. "Somebody should have stayed," he said quietly. "Since they didn't, we will." They drove to Elias's cabin, a small place with cracked walls, a wood stove that complained before warming, and a sense of peace that only came from having nothing left to lose. Elias made soup. Claire stared into the steam like it might answer questions she wasn't ready to ask. That night, as the storm howled outside, Elias sat awake in his chair, Ghost at his feet, listening to Claire cry softly in the next room. He had no idea that the woman sleeping under his roof controlled a fortune larger than the town itself. And Claire had no idea that the man keeping her safe was about to change her understanding of loyalty, love, and what it truly meant to be rich. And just when they both thought the worst was over, the world came looking for her. Morning brought sirens, not police, but something worse. Black SUVs lined the dirt road like a threat. Men in suits stepped out, their shoes too clean for the snow, their eyes sharp with urgency. Claire froze when she saw them. Elias moved instinctively, stepping between her and the door. "You expecting company?" he asked, his voice calm but ready. Her hands trembled. "I didn't think they'd find me this fast." That was when the truth came out, not in a dramatic speech, but in pieces, cracked and heavy. Claire wasn't just a bride left behind. She was the majority shareholder of a global tech empire. The wedding wasn't about love. It was about control. When she refused to sign over her assets, the groom had panicked, abandoned her, hoped exposure and fear would break her, but it hadn't. What broke her was realizing how disposable she had been to people who claimed to love her. The men outside weren't enemies. They were security, legal teams, people paid to protect her wealth. Yet none of them had wrapped her in a coat. None had carried her through the snow. None had stayed awake to make sure she was breathing through the night. Claire looked at Elias, eyes full. "You didn't even know who I was," he shrugged. "It didn't matter." That answer stayed with her. In the weeks that followed, the story spread not of a billionaire, but of a veteran and his dog who saved a stranger when no one else would. Claire delayed returning to her world. She stayed in the cabin. Helped Cook. Listen to Elias talk about the war, about Ghost, about the men he lost, and the life he never rebuilt. For the first time in years, Elias felt useful, not as a soldier, not as a survivor, but as a human being. When Claire finally left, she didn't say goodbye like people usually do. She hugged Elias hard. She knelt to Ghost level and whispered something only he heard. Months passed. Then one day, a letter arrived. Then another. Then trucks. Claire kept her promise. The cabin was rebuilt. The land was protected. A veterans retreat was founded in Elias's name. Jobs, therapy, housing, and dignity for men and women the world had forgotten. Elias didn't become rich in the way people imagine. He became something better. At the opening ceremony, Claire stood beside him. Not in white, not in silk, but in a simple coat, smiling like someone who had finally found her footing. "I lost everything that day," she said to the crowd, "and I gained the only thing that matters, proof that kindness still exists." Elias looked at Ghost, older now, resting peacefully at his feet. The snow began to fall again, soft and quiet, but this time it didn't feel cold.